I'm here at Big Star Records here in Adelaide, South Australia. And not only is it one of the final remaining independent record stores anywhere, it's my record store. Yeah, when I was a teenager, this is where all my hard-earned money went. And today, we're going to talk about what my dreams were back in those days, which was to be a recording superstar, to get a recording contract, to be a rock star, all that sort of jazz. And why it's probably not all it's cracked up to be. And if you still are out there going, I need a record deal from a label, yeah, maybe you don't. Let's go for a chat and a stroll. So back when I was younger, yeah, this is the place. Buy all of my records, all of my CDs, all of my concert tickets as well. And I always loved the Big Star logo over here with the phone number. So old school that here in Adelaide, we now have 8s in front of all of our phone numbers, but no, that just shows you how long Big Star Records have been here for. And when I was younger and making very little money, so we're talking, I'd make $100 a week. I was working originally at KFC, which is a chicken place, as many of you would know, working for the KFC delivery in the call centre. And depending how much I worked in the week, I would make $80 to $100. Now, for a 15, 16-year-old, wasn't great, but wasn't terrible. And what that would usually buy me was about $10 to spend on junk food. Yeah, I ate a bit of that back in the day. And usually about $90 for music. So my disposable income went very predominantly on music. I would buy a lot of CDs. And back in those days, CDs, an album, was $30. Like just across the board. Here in Australia, $30 bought you a CD. Sure, you could buy second-hand CDs. It might have been $15 or $18. The occasional CD single or EP might have been $5 or $10, but for the most part, $30 was an album. And back in those days, more of that money went to the actual artist than perhaps does today, but probably not as much as you think it did. Because even in the glory days, even back in the days of folks making records and having record deals and the likes of the bands I was buying then, we're talking Green Day, Offspring, Silverchair, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, Smashing Pumpkins. They all had record deals with various different record labels, usually either one of the big three or a subsidiary thereof, and they would be putting out records and making money. But of that $30, and look, it's varied over time, but it wasn't uncommon for people that had record deals to be making $2 out of that, $3. And why was that? Well, because the record companies, the labels, were making the vast majority. These bands that had record deals, some of those deals were great, but there are so many bands that came out, especially out of the 80s and 90s, and even before, like back in the day, all the Motown singers and people that were taken advantage of by the evil record companies. Yeah, they didn't make the money. It was made by the middle people, the business people, the money men. And I say men because probably 95% were actually men, at least back in those days. So why do I tell you all of this? What's the backstory all about? Well, just this week, Chappell Roan, you may have seen at the Grammys, came out and had some things to say about record labels. Chappell Roan's story, I talk about it in more detail in another video, which you can find in the description of this one that I did a couple of days ago. And I talked about exactly what she said and why. And the short version is, she was a YouTube creator. Sounds familiar, right? She was sharing cover songs and some original songs on YouTube, and then a record label discovered her. Yay, good times had by all. She was a minor, she was under the age of 18 at the time. She signed a record deal. She produced music for the record company. And look, I don't know the specifics of her deal, but if it's anything like most record deals, she would have been given an advance in order to make an album, to make music videos, and that covers a lot of stuff. And look, am I saying that record companies do nothing, that you can do everything by yourself and it's super easy? Well, no, because record companies have a lot of ins. They handle things like promotion and distribution. They obviously handle things like the actual recording and mixing and mastering and a lot of stuff. But that's why the artist doesn't always end up with the best deal at the end of the day, because there's a lot of things that go into the process of being a rock superstar or pop star or any other sort of music star. So she shared her story, and at the Grammys gets up there and says, hey, I was a minor, I got signed by a record label. As soon as they thought I wasn't profitable anymore, they dropped me. And this is common. This is what happens a lot. The way that the record industry works generally, or has worked in the past and still works now, is that a label will sign a lot of artists. They'll sign as many artists as they can. Not as many as they can, as many as they can afford to. And they'll put money into these artists. And it's just like, it's a lottery for them. It's a lottery, but they win quite well from it. So they will just go out there and say, right, here's 20 artists. We're going to invest $100,000 in 20 artists. So we're going to spend $2 million. And you might think, well, that's a lot. For an artist that has no money, getting a $100,000 advance sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah, where do I sign up? Where do I sign up? The problem is it's an advance. So quite often it needs to be paid back. So a lot of people that get record contracts actually end up owing money once they're dumped. So think about how annoying it would be to be annoying, how purely infuriating it would be to get a record deal. You've been working at your craft for years, you finally get a record deal, and then you get an advance, you make an album, the album does okay, but then the record company says, yeah, you're not doing as well as we'd hoped. We think that there's other artists that we'd like to invest in, so we're dropping you. And then they spill the news that you also owe them that money back because you're in debt. And here's the other problem. Like I said, 100,000. Some artists that the label thought was going to be better, thought they'd have a better chance of success, they gave a lot more money than that. And the other side of it is similar to like sports stars. Like when you come from nothing or low income and you suddenly have high income, and this is one of the points that Chappell Roan was making, you don't exactly have the life skills to manage it. You can't manage the success, but more importantly, long term, you don't know how to manage the money. You don't know how to manage finances. You don't have the life skills to say, yeah, sure, I'm making $1 million now, but what does that look like in 10 years' time? And if I make $1 million this year, should I spend $1 million, or even worse, what a lot of people do, go into debt? Because guess what? The money train's choo-chooing and chug-chugging away, and the good times are rolling, and they're never going to stop. And then the good times stop. And we see this with movie stars, TV stars. We see this with musicians, obviously, and sports stars as well. And it's really sad. And it's all because in all of those industries, the people that are pulling the strings and controlling things are actually the ones making all the money. And not only that, they're not spending the time and they don't have the care factor for their stable of artists to actually give them any sort of life skills. So they're not employing them. It's not like when you're doing a job and you get an apprenticeship or an internship and you learn the ropes and then you work your way up and you develop life skills as you go through, and as you get up the ranks, you get more income. And then you learn about things like investing your money and wealth creation and managing things and insurance. Like none of that is actually taught. If your job is music and you just put all of your trust into someone else to look after everything else, I don't know if you know this about the world, but not everyone has the best interests of other people in mind all the time. I know, it sucks, but it's the case. In fact, there's a wonderful documentary, I forget the name of it. If I can find it quickly, I'll link it in the description. But if you look up, I think it's on YouTube Premium even, or one of the streaming platforms. It's about the Backstreet Boys. And there was a guy called Lou Pearlman who was, look, he's no longer with us, and I don't like to speak ill of the dead, but from all accounts, this guy was a piece of shit. There's really no other way to say that. He took advantage of people. He didn't care about people. He wanted to do whatever he could to make him successful, famous, and profitable at the cost of whatever. So if other people had to suffer, if other people had to do badly so that he could do well, he did that. And he was kind of one of those power hungry creeps too. So it wasn't just about the money, he also liked to be powerful. And yeah, again, without being defamatory and speaking too ill of the dead, not a very nice guy. And if you believe all the reports and you listen to the artists, which don't really have any reason to not tell the truth, yeah, it was pretty bad times. And there was a lot of other bands, not just Backstreet Boys, but a lot of other bands, especially these boy bands, girl bands, pop bands, especially the ones that won. I mean, we could do another entire show about those music competitions and the sort of contracts that come out the other end of your pop stars, idols, The Voices. Yeah, they're not great, because that's not the focus of those shows. The focus of those shows is to showcase all the people, especially the bad ones, because they're the ones that get the viral clips online, to basically make fun of everybody. The winners, the successful people, then go on to be successful by getting record deals and contracts and yay. And then they suffer from exactly the same problems as this, if not worse, because they've had this 15 minutes of fame where they're the number one thing, and then they're suddenly not. And that's really hard, to go from popularity and success and being on the TV and having everyone go, oh wow, you won Bulgarian Idol, you must be the most famous person in the world and always will be. And then a year later, guess what? You're yesterday's news. They're like, well, what have you done for me lately? We want to watch another crop of young people get told that they're crap and then go away and suffer from anxiety and depression for the next 10 years while they try and build a career. Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? I didn't mean for this to be a super sad video and depressing video, but I want to get to the point that I actually wanted to make with this, which is that if you are an independent creator and you don't have a record deal, that's probably really good. That's probably the best thing for the vast majority of artists and creators that are out there. And there's a number of reasons for that, which I'm going to dive into in a moment. But just to finish off on what Chappell Roan was talking about, yeah, she basically said, the record labels, we got you, but you don't got us. So we're giving you our heart and soul. We're pouring 100% of ourselves into our music and into our art, and you're giving us nothing. It's sad, but it's true. And look, can you point to other industries and say the same thing? Sure, absolutely. I've worked for companies where it's the same sort of thing. Unless you are playing the game and brown nosing up to the right people, you're not going to progress. And in fact, you're not going to get the life skills or the learnings, and then they'll get rid of you and boop, you're gone. And yeah, it happens, doesn't it? But it's a little bit different, because as an employee of a company, you get things like health insurance. You get things like here in Australia, superannuation or contributions to your 401k or your retirement or your pension or whatever it is in your part of the world. But when you're a musician, you're an independent contractor, and the benefits are kind of weirdly are related to farming. Again, because I'm hippie, lefty, socialist Johns, I really wish that farmers didn't have to bear the risk of it raining or being sunny enough or a storm coming or not coming, because that's gambling. At the end of the day, that is gambling, because you are bearing the risk, and something really good could happen and you could make $1 million in a year, or it could go really bad and you could lose $500,000 a year. Why wouldn't you just have the risk bared by someone that can manage all that risk, like an insurance company, and then you make a decent living wage all the time? And I think that's the thing. So I think before we dive into the whole, should this actually be the case? Should record companies act more like employers and employ their artists, especially developing artists, under contracts where they get paid? Maybe they get paid a monthly salary, regardless of the success of their music. Would you sign that record deal? I'll ask you that right now. If you've got a record deal, and instead of it being you get this amount of money and then you get a percentage of the success, but if you're not successful, you owe us, which is how the current system works, would you prefer it if record companies had to pay a proportion of everything to everyone? Is that going to end up being that no matter how successful you are, you get paid the same amount? I know some people would already be getting ready in the comments there telling me what I am. Yes, and it's a certain colour. I just wanted to pause to show you this church. This is we're here in Norwood in Adelaide, and this is one of my favourite churches. This is the Greek Orthodox church, and look at that. It's absolutely stunning. I love that sort of whitewash with the blue accents. Adelaide is the city of churches. We've got a lot of them, and not all of them look quite as nice as that one. But this is one of my favourite churches in all of Adelaide, and there's lots of them. So we're wandering here through the streets of Norwood. This is my local area, my stomping ground, where I've spent a lot of my life wandering about. And I went to school nearby here at Marriotteville High School. Again, you can find that out pretty much anywhere. Pretty sure that's on my Facebook and LinkedIn. So, but yeah, it's just it's a nice area to be. So back in the day when I was at high school, playing in things like Battle of the Bands. Here's another church. See, just everywhere around here are churches, and they're all from like the 1800s. It's all really nice. So playing in things like Battle of the Bands and other sorts of competitions. Yeah, look, I wanted to be a rock star. I did. I wanted to get a record contract, but I also didn't know, and this is the thing, is that there is no education. There's very little education for anyone with life skills. Even here in 2024, especially here in 2024, people are not learnt life skills. And life skills include things like finance and budgeting. I know, it's so sexy, so interesting. It's like, instead of rocking out, instead of writing a new song, why don't we sit down and do our budget and work on our financial skills so that, in 50 years' time, we actually have money to retire with. Said no rock band ever, right? But it is so super important. And the other skill that is not learnt is critical thinking. And that's really required as well for things like signing contracts, for things like identifying whether someone is being nice to you because they genuinely believe in you as a musician and think that you can be successful, or they just want to add you and roll the dice on you, and guess what? If you don't make it, they're going to throw you away. So yeah, learning those sort of skills, those critical thinking skills and learning skills and ability to separate out what is real from what is just lip service is not really taught. And as a father, as a parent, but also as a creator and as an educator, those are the reason I talk about this stuff. You could be saying, Johns, can you get back to GarageBand? Can you get back to Logic Pro? Can you get back to telling us about compression and EQ and mixing and mastering? And I can, and I will. But this stuff's super important because some of you have already been through this. Some of you will go through this. Some of you are going to be approached at some time very soon by someone who is going to offer you something. And if it's fair and reasonable and looks like a good deal, and you've used your critical reasoning and logical thinking skills to work through it, and you want to accept it, great. But I see too many times where folks are like, a record company offered me a record deal, I'm special. They think I'm special. Maybe they do, or again, maybe they're playing this numbers game. Or maybe even worse, it's not really the topic or the subject of this video, but the other thing that could be happening there is that they're a scam. So because everyone knows that people want to be famous and everyone wants their 15 minutes and everyone wants to be a professional and everyone wants a record deal and everyone thinks that getting a deal from a label is the be all and end all, guess what there are now? Yeah, a lot of fake labels. A lot of people pretending to be record labels, pretending that they can make you famous, pretending that they're going to give you a deal, but they're not actually, because they're not real, because they're fake. Gotta watch that sun. Probably picked the worst possible time of day to come and record this one, but it is the time I have. It is the time that I could, and it's the time that I did. So yeah, be wary, be aware of scams, be aware of things that are legitimate but are too good to be true. Be aware of people that are going to tell you things that maybe you want to hear, and maybe they're not even lies, but maybe they're only part of the truth. Maybe it's a half-truth, maybe it's a story that's just conveniently left out a couple of important factors that perhaps you haven't considered. Sorry, needing to make sure I don't get run over as well, because my critical thinking skills are, don't get run over. No podcast recording is worth spending 6 weeks in traction with broken legs. Yeah. So I really wanted to talk about this today because I thought it was really interesting. Now let's for a moment flip things around and play devil's advocate on this stuff. What would a world look like in which musicians were actually just employees? Now, we don't have to look too far for that, because back in the day, it was kind of the case. I talked briefly before about Motown, and probably the best analogy is to look at the movie studios back in the early days, the 30s, 40s and 50s. So we're talking about things like MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. And I actually I watched a video the other day that was the history of The Wizard of Oz. And if you want to find out about an absolute shit show, and I think it was actually on the channel, It's a Shit Show, of a production, yeah, the production of that movie was next level train wreck. But what I learned in that was how the studio system works. I knew a little bit about this, but basically you were paid a wage. You were paid a living wage, and then you were told exactly what to do and when. So movies, you think movie stars these days, you're like, oh, Tom Cruise wouldn't accept that script. Well, guess what? If he worked for MGM in the 40s, he didn't have a choice. He had to accept whatever script they told him to be in, whatever movie they wanted him to be in, he just had to do it because he was paid by them. And he wasn't paid any more or less if the picture was successful or unsuccessful. He was just paid whatever the studio were paying, whatever the basic wages were from the studio. So, yeah. And look, that makes it very easy to exploit people too, which I hate to sort of just slam dunk my case for independence, but I think the one thing that I would disagree with Chappell Roan is that not only do the record labels, are they doing the wrong thing, and should they change the way that they treat artists, I would take it the next step and the next level. This is kind of what I wanted to finish on, or at least sort of end with in this final section. Do we need the record labels at all? In 2025, do we need record labels? Now, at the start of this, I talked about a whole bunch of reasons why artists weren't making money, even back in the day. Why, when I bought my $30 CDs from Big Star Records, why they were only making $2, $3 on that $30 purchase. And the main reasons were that the record companies had to do a lot of things outside of just the recording. So outside of just recording, mixing and mastering, there was promotion, there was distribution, there was the actual physical printing of records and CDs and cassette tapes. So there's a lot of things. There was getting magazine ads, there was getting radio airplay. So the record labels did a lot of things. And look, a lot of those things I think are still required. But I would suggest that there needs to be a different balance, right? Sorry, had sun right in the lens there for a second. There needs to be a different balance. We need to find a way that the things that you can do as an independent artist that are distributing your music, they're the writing. So artists should, in my opinion, own. I don't see a reason why in 2025 artists should give away the licensing for their music, either the mechanical licensing or the songwriting or the masters. Artists should own their music. And record companies and labels given that we don't really have the same need, like you can distribute your music with DistroKid, they're a channel sponsor, and yes, link in the description if you want to save some money with them. But you can use any distributor, there's heaps of them out there, and you can get your music out there onto Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon and Tidal and Deezer and all the places. So the distribution is kind of sorted. The physical production, I mean, you can get that done through other companies now as well. Places like Bandcamp, you can get actual vinyl records and CDs. CD Baby, they started as someone you can produce your own CDs through. And you could say that, well, the record companies can do it at scale, like they've got the infrastructure and they've got the scale in place to do it better. But is that really the case? Or is the fact that we have online services? That was the case when Glenn knew Dave. Glenn from the record label knew Dave from the distribution house and would get a good deal because he was representing a whole bunch of different artists. But do we have that in 2025? Do we need that? What do we need more of though? So what is actually lacking? What is the gap? I would argue that it's the promotion. It's being able to promote your music, and it's probably the thing that I've struggled with the most. And it's one thing that I think that PR, so public relations and promotion, and getting on like podcasts or having a manager that can actually get you radio airplay or get you placed onto playlists and that sort of thing, I think that is still important. But should that cost you, should that cost you 90 to 95% of the income that you make from your music? Or should that be 20%? Should that be like an agent where you keep 80% and the agent gets 20%? I think that there's some improvements that can be made. And look, I'm a fence sitter from way back. I don't think that everything that Chappell Roan said is 100% correct, because I worry that if we went down the path of record labels, every developing artist just gets the same base deal, then you might as well go have a job. You might as well go work in any other industry, because one of the reasons people want to get into the music industry is that they want to share their art, but it does give you the opportunity to be a success. And old me, 15-year-old me, sitting at Big Star, I wanted to be one of the bands on those CDs. The thing is though, now I can. Now I can distribute my own music and I can actually be on, not necessarily the CDs, but I can be released on the same platforms as all of the other artists. So as I finish my walk, as I end up near yet more churches here in the city of churches here in Adelaide, I just wanted to say thank you to you folks for not only listening to this podcast, but for supporting each other. I think having community around music is super important, and I think listening to what Chappell said, to what other artists have come out and said, and what sort of some media outlets have said, there's obviously some support behind this movement to make things better. And anytime things are made better for the people, and the 1% who are making all the money get a little wake-up call, I think there's power in that. I think there's power in people getting together and having a voice and saying, hey, we don't think the way that things are done currently is the best way to do them. What do you think though? I want to get your thoughts. Drop those in the comments down below. And until next time, folks, I'm going to go cross this road and not get run over. So please, be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, keep creating. I'll see you next time.